All right. Hi, everybody. We're going to get started with the healthcare webinar for Michigan Ross. So thanks, everybody, for attending. Excited to have a great webinar for you today, showing you all of the great resources that we have for healthcare here at the school. And I'm going to have 3 people on the webinar today that are representing the Healthcare and Life Sciences Club and have all utilized different resources here at the school. So they'll be able to share with you their experiences. Click. Okay. All right, so this is the agenda for today. We're going to go through essentially why Ross. So each of the students are going to talk about their reasons for why they chose Ross for healthcare, and then we're going to go through a lot of the curriculum. So what you might not know is there's actually an extensive list of courses at Ross, but also at Greater University of Michigan as opportunities, which I think is one of the major reasons why Ross is great for healthcare. Then we're going to go through a lot of what Ross is known for is experience-driven learning. So many people think of MAP. I know many of you are probably familiar with MAP, but there's a lot more than that. MAP is an important component, but there's several other opportunities that you can take advantage of here at Ross. We're going to talk through career resources because if you're interested in healthcare, you're more than likely interested in doing healthcare post-MBA as a career option. So we'll talk through the different resources to support you in that. And we're going to talk pretty extensively about the Healthcare and Life Science Club. Since all these guys are involved in it, the resources are really interwoven between the Career Services Office, the club resources, and a lot of the classes and academic opportunities. And then at the end, we'll have some time. If you guys do have any questions, we'll be happy to answer those. So we'll move on to the next slide. So I want everybody to introduce themselves. Like I said, we have 3 current students, all MBA 2, so very well versed in the opportunities here. So if you guys could each introduce yourselves so that way we can associate a voice with the picture here that we'll be hearing throughout the webinar, and also share your story about why you chose Ross for healthcare in particular. So Caitlin, you want to start?
Yeah, so my name is Caitlin Delaney. I'm sure I've talked to a couple of you on the phone before, so hello again. So I did my undergrad at Bucknell. I was in DC before Ross, where I worked at Avalere Health. And there are really 3 reasons why I chose Ross for healthcare, and the first one being the flexibility of the concentration. I liked how that was an option, but I knew that if I decided to not do it, I could still take all the healthcare courses both at Ross and then at the Greater University of Michigan community. And then on that same note, the second reason was the non-Ross healthcare opportunity. So when you think about the University of Michigan, one of the things that makes us unique is that we have all these great organizations and schools that touch healthcare, and you have access to a lot of those resources. And then finally, MAP, and we're going to touch upon that later.
All right, Andrew, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So my name is Andrew Brecker. I went to Harvard prior to coming to Ross. I was at Athena Health, which is a healthcare IT company outside of Boston. And I chose Ross because I was really interested in the kind of experiential learning and the interdisciplinary approach that Ross has towards healthcare. So you have the opportunity to take classes within the Ross community, but also at the other graduate programs. And I use that opportunity to take classes at School of Public Health. And then in addition to MAP, there are other classroom activities that actually will get you outside of the classroom and into healthcare clinics.
All right, Courtney.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Landy. Prior to coming to school, I worked at Deloitte Consulting in DC. So really, the first reason I decided to come to Ross, I narrowed my list down to schools that offered this dual degree program. Ross has a lot of people doing dual degrees, but I specifically wanted to do the one within the School of Public Health, specifically the Health Management and Policy program. And but from there, I also really enjoyed the idea of Ross's experiential learning, not only MAP, but other initiatives through the Sanger Leadership Center. So you know, I thought I would be able to learn in class as well as outside of class all I needed to really be successful in healthcare.
All right, and I guess I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. My picture isn't up here because I want you to focus on these guys and their experiences, but my name is Taya Sapp. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions with the Ross School of Business. Many of you might have gotten an email from me about this webinar earlier, but happy to have you joining us. So we're going to get started with a lot of the resources, like I was talking about, that we have for healthcare here, starting with some of the academic ones.
Great. So this is Courtney. I'll be talking about the healthcare curriculum. So the first one listed is a dual degree. Obviously, this is the program that I'm in, and you know, you don't necessarily have to apply at the beginning. If you're already in Ross and after a year you kind of realize you're interested in the dual degree, you can apply to the School of Public Health or other dual degree programs. It's very flexible. Obviously, this is a bit more of a time commitment. For me, it's 3 years to complete two degrees, but for me it was also very important to get that extra credibility in healthcare that I didn't feel I had prior to coming to school. But for those of you that aren't really interested in a dual degree, there's several other options within the healthcare management concentration as well as electives. So in terms of the concentration, that would be 12 credits total, and 3 of those credits should be taken outside of Ross, which is a great opportunity, as Andrew mentioned, to take classes in the School of Public Health, law school, public policy, you name it. There's healthcare courses in almost every other school, in, you know, very well-renowned graduate programs. And then also something to note is the healthcare map, if you choose to do one, is 3 credits to count towards that. And the concentration is pretty flexible. It doesn't require an application. So if you decide, you know, kind of into your first or second year that you actually will have enough credits to graduate with the concentration, you can easily add it. So it's a great opportunity, but if you're not really interested in that as well, there's so many electives, and we'll talk about those in a second, but you know, anyone's welcome to take the electives. I've taken several, all 3 of us have taken different courses, and we'll get into that in a second.
Andrew, we're now on the curriculum slide.
All right, thank you. So the courses that are offered at Ross and then beyond Ross really provide a great opportunity to see what's happening in healthcare in a variety of fields within healthcare itself. So one class I really want to highlight to start, I think, is Business of Biology, which is a class that's taught by Dr. Canner. And I know a couple of us, Caitlin took it as well, and I think Courtney took it last year. But it gives you the opportunity to take classes with students outside of Ross, students from the School of Medicine, Pharmacy, Nursing, to really understand how biology, pharma drugs, and biotechs are developed and then brought to market. Another class I really liked on this slide that you'll see is Comprehensive Healthcare Strategies, and that gave me an insight into the payer and provider space. It's taught by a professor named Dr. Butts, who brings a really positive attitude towards healthcare, which I think a lot of people have this negative view, and so it's a really refreshing view to have of this industry. But you can see the variety of classes that we have, ranging from emerging markets to local politics in DC. So the healthcare concentration of the coursework gives you an opportunity to get classes that focus on domestic U.S. policy, but also international policy. I believe Courtney is taking a class that's actually going to bring her to India to focus on healthcare in India, and last year a class took people to Sri Lanka in a trip to actually understand local healthcare markets there.
Yeah, Andrew, I think it's interesting too, one of the points you brought up about the fact that you're taking classes with people outside of Ross too that are in healthcare degrees as their primary thing, which I think is one of the kind of hidden gems about the school too, is not only are you allowed to take classes outside of Ross, but people from Ross, or people from outside of Ross are allowed to take classes here. So I think that is truly an interdisciplinary opportunity that really makes Ross unique and is something that a lot of students appreciate here.
Great. So now we're going to talk a little bit about MAP, and I just wanted to give you some general background on MAP, and some of this you might already know. And then I'm going to talk about my MAP experience, and Courtney and Andrew are going to talk a little bit about theirs. And so MAP, on a very high level, is 7 weeks, your last quarter of your first MBA year, and it's no extra cost. And one of the cool things about it is that, one, you have a wide variety of companies and projects to choose from. So from last year, we had over 100 projects to choose from, and many of those were healthcare ones. And then second, you gain exposure to senior executives. And so last year, again, over 90% of projects were delivered to senior execs. And I was one of those projects. And what's so great about it, and for me this is true, is that it truly is an internship before an internship. And so I wanted to try my hand at marketing and working at a startup because I'd never had that experience before. And so I got my top ranked map, which was helping an Israeli medical device startup come up with a U.S. market launch strategy and then a 3-year marketing plan. And that project took me to Israel for over a week. We did the majority of our work here in Ann Arbor. But it was truly a transformational experience. I learned about marketing. I made friends with 4 other of my classmates. And I learned that I did not like marketing, which was good to learn in this, it was almost like a safe environment.
So I'll talk about mine next. I actually did not do a healthcare map. I felt like doing 3 years of healthcare management was a lot, plus 3 healthcare internships. So I worked on a project in Rwanda working on coffee. So we did kind of marketing, finance, operations. So, I mean, great skills that I can definitely apply, but I just so happened wanted to do something outside of healthcare. And then Andrew?
Yeah, so my map was a domestic map. I worked with the University of Michigan Health System with MedSport, which is their orthopedic department, and had the opportunity to work with physicians at the hospital to build out a business plan to launch destination orthopedic surgery center. And so we got to build out a business plan, brought us to other major hospitals around the country, as well as gave us the opportunity to work with the athletic department at Michigan. So got to meet Coach Harbaugh, got to meet the new athletic director, and then also have conversations with various alumni and donors to the university to understand how they could support this initiative. So really an opportunity to, take what I've learned from a finance and a modeling perspective and apply it to the University of Michigan Health System.
Yeah, I mean, those are all very different projects covering different topics. Obviously, Courtney's is, especially because it's not healthcare. But I think that's one of the really cool things is that, like Courtney mentioned, is like she felt like she had a pretty strong healthcare background with doing the dual degree with the courses and some of the extracurriculars. So you really have the choice to try things out. And it's not necessarily like it's incorporating different things. So Caitlin did healthcare and marketing. And so you can test out one aspect of healthcare if you want to do that, or you can do something completely different. So I think it's nice that you can kind of customize things according to what your own personal interests are and the level of depth you want to have in healthcare or within a particular function or industry.
So something we want to talk about in addition to the curriculum and the classroom opportunities or the experiential healthcare opportunities at Ross and within the community at University of Michigan. I think there are some resources that people may not be aware of and opportunities that you may not have heard of. First, I'd like to kind of highlight the investment funds, which are highlighted through or hosted through the Zell-Lurie Institute, which is our Entrepreneurial Studies Institute. But there are 4 investment funds, and each investment fund actually has a healthcare branch. So one of the things I've been very active on campus is the Zell-Lurie Commercialization Fund, which is a pre-seed investment fund, and I lead the healthcare team. And so we invest, $150,000 or so a year of the university's money into startups that are in the greater Michigan area. And we look for healthcare companies to invest in technologies coming out of the university community or the greater Ann Arbor area, in addition to other technology fields as well. But there are other funds as well, the Social Venture Fund and the Wolverine Venture Fund, which offer similar VC investing, but at later stages. Additionally, we have the IHPI on campus, which is the Institute for Health Policy Innovation. And again, this is a multidisciplinary institute that brings people that are focused on healthcare from around the university community to offer lectures and education sessions about what's happening. A few weeks ago, the vice president of the American Hospital Association came and spoke. We've also had professors from other business schools who work on healthcare come and speak. And so it's a great opportunity to get involved outside of Ross for that community. The Research Institute at Ross is the William Davidson Institute, and the William Davidson Institute has a healthcare focus, healthcare arm, and so a lot of the maps that are healthcare maps are hosted through William Davidson, and a lot of the research that we're doing on healthcare in the university comes from that institute. And then the other opportunity is the IHI, which we have a chapter on campus, and I think Caitlin can tell you a little bit more about that because she's been involved with it.
Yeah, so IHI, I did a project with IHI last fall, and it lasted a couple months. And one of the great things about IHI is that there's a number of projects, and each year the projects either change or an extension of the project from the year before. And the project that I worked on last year was I was on a team with 2 students from the School of Public Health and 1 student from the pharmacy school here at Michigan. And we're helping the University of Michigan Health System's inpatient pharmacy improve the wait times for patients. And then there were a variety of other projects too that IHI offered, and they matched you. You apply at the beginning of the year, and at the end, not exactly the end of the year, but in March, you present your findings to everyone else who participated in IHI project, and then any faculty members or any other tangential person who was related to IHI throughout the year.
We'll be answering some of these questions you're asking at the end, but there's one that's relevant to what you're talking about right now. So somebody was wondering if that's specific to a course or if that's something you do outside as an extracurricular.
It's an extracurricular. So that's one of the cool things about Michigan is that you have all these non-Ross extracurricular activities that you can do that can really round out your academic experience. And so this is not a course credit. This is something that I did on my own, and this is like my own dedicated time. But it was a really great learning experience that you wouldn't have gotten inside the classroom.
Yeah, I think whenever I talk to prospective students, I think it's always interesting because you're so used to what you're learning is in the classroom. And at Ross, it's really different because, yes, you're learning things in the classroom, obviously, but there's so much that you do outside of it. All the funds that Andrew was just talking about, a lot of the different opportunities through the clubs that we'll be getting to later are really, really strong learning opportunities that you're doing that complement what you're learning in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly.
And Caitlin, did you want to mention the startup opportunity that you've had also to work on a healthcare startup?
Sure. So this is related to, I guess, Andrew's talk about healthcare startups. So I've been helping with a healthcare startup called Prediction Bio for the past almost year. And that's another great thing that can happen at the University of Michigan is there's a really strong startup community that Andrew talked about earlier. And so I was matched with a biomedical engineering master's student who created this medical device here at Michigan and with faculty. And he's very early stage, but trying to get his first seed funding. And it was an MBA too from last year who started helping this co-founder of the startup, and I've been, helping him as well, and that has been a good learning experience as well, from anything from learning back-end coding to update a website to coming up with pitch decks to sitting in meetings with him. So those are other unique opportunities that you can get here at Michigan.
Great. So next we're going to talk about kind of career resources. Ross has a great support network of career resources. First, we have career consultants. So through RCS, Ross Career Services, there's a lot of full-time staff dedicated to helping you with your career journey. They also host this recruiting preparation called Career Action Days, and this is usually at the beginning of school, like right before your classes start. They help with resume review, mock interviews, really get you prepared to launch into the recruiting season and kind of make sure that you're going down a path that you're really excited and comfortable with and understand kind of what options exist. A lot of people come to school with not a clear path, so kind of help you guide on that path. And then these consultants also help with other kind of trainings like social media training and mock interviews, and it's really helpful. And we also have 65 peer coaches, and I'm one of the 2 healthcare dedicated peer coaches. So on a weekly basis, we host this thing called FACT Group. And basically for people with healthcare interests, we kind of show them, we have a weekly curriculum, which we'll talk about on the next slide, and really help guide you through the recruiting process. But then also you can work with us on mock interviews or general counseling. So it's a lot of MBA2s really supporting you on that path. And even though I'm a healthcare FACT Group leader, there's other FACT Groups that healthcare people were involved in, such as consulting, technology, marketing, and then that you could also utilize a peer coach in healthcare to understand, nuances of healthcare interviews. So moving on to the next slide. This is just like for the FACT Group that I mentioned, this is a curriculum that I used this year. So we first talked about networking, HLS Symposium, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit.
We abbreviate in there, and that's the Healthcare and Life Science Club, but there's only so much you can fit on a line on the slide.
Yeah, and then we talk about resumes and different resources throughout campus. Odyssey is this word that we use exclusively at Ross, I think, but it basically talks about like when it's kind of your 3 to 4 minute pitch on kind of why this company, and then we talk about off-campus recruiting since, obviously a school has a lot of companies that come on campus, but a lot of our students find roles that they're really interested through other, alumni or other resources. So peer coaches help you learn how to navigate that process, cover letters, behavioral interviews, case interviews, and then also just how to navigate the on-campus resources, like our bidding system and the interview system. So I think it's a very comprehensive curriculum that by the end of the first semester, you feel really confident going into your interviews when they start in January.
Yeah, it really sets you up. I actually sat in on the career action days that Courtney was mentioning earlier this year. So it's a full 3 days in August before classes start that are preparing you. You're actually meeting with alumni in healthcare. You can do these things. And then right, like Courtney was saying, right from the very beginning of the year, you're going to start meeting with FACT Group leaders and all of these, using all these different resources. So it's literally from August all the way through January when you're interviewing that you have regular interactions and regular support and check-ins with different members of the career services team, which includes some of the second-year students like Courtney. All right, so Caitlin's going to go over to the Healthcare and Life Science Club. She's the president, so she knows all about it.
Yeah, so does Courtney and Andrew because they're both fellow board members with me. So the Healthcare and Life Science Club, we do a variety of different things, and I like to bucket it into 3 different categories, and they all fit into what's on the slide that's in front of you. And so first and foremost, we do education supports, and then recruiting, and then finally community building or social events. And so in terms of education, we kick off every year. This year we actually did it during orientation with a boot camp, and what that really is a Healthcare 101, and we bring in expert faculty members to talk about different topics. And this really gives people a broad and comprehensive view of healthcare and putting a little spin into business. And so whether or not you have a background in healthcare, you probably maybe have a more niche background, so like either in the provider side, payer side, et cetera, or you've never been in healthcare before and you're a career switcher. And so bootcamp really helps you lay a foundation for a broader healthcare knowledge. And then we top that off with weekly education sessions. And so every Sunday we hold a meeting. There's free lunch included, and topics range from Healthcare 101 again, and then deeper dives into different industries. And we lead them ourselves, so MBA2s and MBA1s if they're an expert, and so it's a really great leadership and presentation opportunity. And then education sessions kind of teeter more towards recruiting towards the end of the year as MBA1s start to really jump off their summer internship recruiting experience. And on that note, we start every year with a symposium, and Courtney was actually one of the VPs of the symposium this year. And we typically bring in anywhere between 15 and 20 companies, and we do both recruiting, so networking events, and then some education. So we have the company representatives speak on panels on various topics. So the topic for this year's symposium, or this past year's symposium rather, was disruptive practices in healthcare. And so panelists talked about innovative and disruptive things that their companies were doing. And then we also have on-campus corporate events with each of the companies that work with us, and again, that's about 15 to 20 companies. That includes coffee chats, lunch and learns, case competitions, and more of those types of professional events. And you see here we also have corporate treks, and so we usually have between 1 to 3 a year, and that changes year to year. So we have a New York, New Jersey trek that focuses on pharma companies, in Minneapolis that is primarily med device companies, in San Francisco, and that is built into a larger Ross All trek to look at tech, healthcare, it's a broader range of industries. And then finally, this is my favorite part about the Healthcare and Life Science Club, is this building of the Ross healthcare community. And so one of the cool things about having weekly meetings, and then we have one-off activities like happy hour. We're thinking about doing a TED Talk and even a movie viewing about healthcare. So the movie is called WIT, with a dinner discussion. And so it's a really good opportunity to get to know your classmates, both in your grade and then the grade above or below, depending on whether you're a second year or first year. And so it's just really fun to get to know your classmates who are as passionate about healthcare as you are. And as I mentioned, there is a lot of companies that come on campus, and here is actually both companies that come on campus to recruit formally and those that do off-campus recruiting. And so obviously there's a number of healthcare-related companies that rosters end up in. I personally interned at DaVita this summer. They have a strong on-campus presence, and I'm actually doing off-campus recruiting now. I want to work at a healthcare startup in Chicago. But I know Courtney and Andrew have had relationships or have been going to companies that are on this list.
All right, so you can see this is the contact information for the 3 students that have been on this webinar, but so you're welcome to follow up with them individual if you have specific questions. But we do have a number of questions that people have submitted, so I will pose those to these guys, and hopefully they'll be able to respond. So the first one that I wanted to check in with, somebody was asking about the timeline for selecting MAP projects versus having an internship already, and how you go about knowing, like, if you know what your internship is and if you should try to do a similar topic for both, or what that looks like. So can you guys kind of go over what the timeline looks like for when you know what your internship is and when you find out or select your MAP projects?
That's a great question. So usually the MAP selection process is over our winter break, so before January, the last week of December, I guess, or like first week of January. But you won't know your internship probably until late January, mid-February at the earliest, really. So, I mean, the strategy is completely up to you, but some people, you might want to note that some of the MAPs have, and companies have like NDAs, so you can't work with, or a non-disclosure agreement. So you might not want to work with a competitor. It might be an issue. Not all of them, but some of them it is a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and if you have diverse interests in healthcare, you might want to pick 2 different things. So maybe do a MAP with a med device company and intern in pharma or provider. So you can kind of see different things or different functions like what Caitlin did.
Yeah. And I think to build off that too, I think the idea of picking a MAP before you actually know what your internship can be a little overwhelming when you think about it right now. But what happens is during the fall, you are taking your core classes, and so you start to familiarize yourself with the different topics and ones in which you think that you feel more strongly about. Then on top of that, you're building relationships with the companies that you'd be ultimately recruiting for. So it's not like in January you start having conversations with the companies that you could potentially intern with. You start those conversations in October. And so you get an idea of the companies that you might be interested in or not interested in. At the same time, you're picking out the areas of your core curriculum that feel a little bit stronger to you. And so when you're actually making your decision on ranking your MAP in the end of December, as Courtney mentioned, there's a little bit more clarity.
All right. So another question I see is around this doesn't necessarily apply to you guys, but I'm confident you know the answers. So some of the students who are applying to or looking to work at the major consulting firms, the Deloitte, the McKinseys. So how are they able to say specifically that they want to do healthcare consulting, or do they have to recruit for the general practice? Do you guys have a sense for what your classmates, what they're able to do when they're doing that recruiting?
I think it depends on the firm. Yep. Some firms have separate healthcare application processes, which is great because then you can really focus. Others have more of a generalist model. So you can kind of articulate that preference for healthcare, but they can't bucket you, as you are going through the recruiting process. And then also to note, there's a lot of niche firms that recruit on campus that specifically recruit for healthcare consulting. So that's always an option.
So speaking of niche firms or some of these other things, what about people who are specifically interested in working in hospitals or healthcare systems? Do you have a sense for what the recruiting process looks like for that type of career path?
Yeah, I can speak to that because that was something that I thought that I wanted to do. So again, as background, I was working in the policy world in healthcare in DC before, and I thought when I went to Ross that I wanted to work at a hospital afterwards. And so if you are interested in working at a hospital or health system after Ross, it is mainly off-campus. So we have some informal off-campus relationships with hospitals like Kaiser or health systems like Kaiser, New York Presbyterian, Extension, and I think that list keeps on growing every year as people who have healthcare background realize the business skill set is becoming more and more important. So it is definitely a process that you can do, and some of the alumni have done it, and there's undoubtedly MBA 2s, if you were to be MBA 1s next year or even the year after, who have done it, and they would be great resources for you in addition to career services if that was something that you're thinking about doing.
I actually did my first internship in the provider space through the School of Public Health, and I think not many people from Ross take advantage of those resources, but you're obviously welcome to go to their recruiting events too. And in my program, I think, I don't know, we used to say this, don't quote me on this statistic, but we used to say that we had the most hospital CEOs of any school of public health. So, I mean, we have really great resources across the university that you can take advantage of.
So that kind of leads into a couple other questions I see now. One is kind of specifically directed toward Courtney about what the advantages are of doing the dual degree versus just the degree in public health or just the degree in business. And then the other one is around the healthcare concentration and kind of the pros and cons of doing the healthcare concentration. If you guys thought about doing it or not doing it, what kinds of factors you were using as you were making that decision.
Sure, I'll talk about the dual degree, and then maybe Andrew could talk about the concentration because I know he's getting it. In terms of the dual degree, I always knew I wanted to come back to get a degree in business. And then talking to a lot of my mentors, they were just kind of convincing me that if you want to be, I was a career switcher. I didn't really have a large background in healthcare. To kind of gain that legitimacy in the field, it sounded like, getting a degree in public health made sense. But I was also kind of geared towards providers. And in the provider setting, there are some MBAs, but there's a lot more public health degrees in the provider setting just across the country. So I thought it would just give me double the network, more legitimacy, and also to really understand the nuances of the healthcare industry, which is very complicated. And if you're not already in it, it's hard to learn sometimes in 2 years. And also one thing I really loved was that I get 2 internship experiences. You see I had 2 listed, but I actually interned at a 3rd this summer before I started at school. So, doing a dual degree just gives you more opportunities, but if you feel like you already have that really strong base of healthcare, I don't necessarily think it's going to add a lot of value. But I mean, I don't regret it. I mean, I'm at the end of my 3 years. I'm really happy that I did it. I feel like I've gained 2 great networks that will follow me the rest of my, career. And that was the right decision for me. But I think Andrew could talk very well to the concentration.
Yeah, sure, certainly. So the concentration, I think, provides an opportunity for people to really show and indicate both as having something to put on your resume, but more importantly as an opportunity to really dive deep into healthcare at Ross. It kind of indicates to employers that you're really focused on this industry because of the variety of opportunities within the curriculum. You can get experience in any number of fields within healthcare. And then we're also really starting to build out our concentration alumni network. So the concentration is relatively new, but every year we're graduating more and more people, and so we're trying to create this strong network of healthcare professionals who have really taken their time at Ross to focus on the concentration and create a tighter network within. I would also say, as we continue to develop the concentration, we're trying to create more experiences for people that indicate that they're going to do it that may not be as available for people outside of the concentration. Still certainly available if there's space, but we want to kind of create more specific opportunities to meet with companies or meet with or take classes specifically within the concentration.
All right, and then I have one more question here. I think we'll wrap up. If you did have more specific questions, feel free to follow up with me or any of these guys later too. We want to keep it we want to keep answering questions that apply to most people in this. So I know there's been some pretty specific questions on here. But the last question that I wanted to make sure we answered is around case competitions here at Ross and healthcare-focused case competitions. Could you talk to that? Because I know we didn't really cover that too much in the webinar, but I know that that's a good way where students get experience and exposure as well. So could you give some examples of those?
Yeah, so Medtronic every year does a pretty big case competition, and it tends to be the first one that comes to campus, so a lot of people do it. I did that my first year, and my group won at Ross, so we actually they flew us out to Minneapolis, and we competed against other schools. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but it was still an awesome experience, and getting to, visit a company, gain exposure, and, kind of network a bit was great, but also getting to really dive into healthcare marketing. After that experience, it made me realize I really wanted to focus my recruiting search on medical devices. So, it just gave me more fodder for my resume as well as discussion points when I was interviewing for companies. Also, my first year, PwC had a healthcare case competition at the School of Public Health, and I did that one, and that one was a lot of fun too. Not many Ross people did that, I think, but there's case competitions at all throughout the university that you can participate in.
Yeah, and I think some of you might not be fully aware what a case competition is.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And so to give you some, at a high level, because every single case competition is a little different, broad context is that a company comes in that has a strong relationship with Ross. They present you with a real business problem, one that they're either going through currently or one that they have in the past. And it's up to you, and you're typically on a team that you either pull together yourself or get assigned to. It depends on the type of company or the company itself. And then you put together a presentation either in 24 hours or across a couple of days that combines both public research, so secondary research and primary research, and then you ultimately present your recommendations. And this is all done through a PowerPoint presentation, and then finalists then have to present, and so it's a really great way to get your stuff in your face in front of companies that you might be interested in. And then ultimately, for a lot of these competitions, you then, if you are a finalist like Courtney was, compete against other schools, get to visit the company. And so it's great because you get an idea of the different business problems that the companies are facing. You get to work on a team, build those types of consulting and problem-solving skills in the real world. And then it looks good if you do well to those companies, and you can put on your resume. So that at a very high level is a case competition.
Actually, some of the companies, they offer, not just monetary rewards for people that, place, but also sometimes they can guarantee you an interview, which, some of these companies are pretty, competitive. So it's a great way to kind of, start the recruiting process.
Yeah, there's actually even some that guarantee you an internship. So,
great. All right, well that looks like it's wrapping up most of the questions we have. So again, these guys have their email addresses up on the screen. If you do have questions for admissions, feel free to email rossadmissions@umich.edu as well. But thanks again for joining us for the healthcare webinar, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.